I've got a chart here that shows that Bitcoin is going up in price indefinitely, but actually in price in two different ways. Most people don't understand there are two different ways to acquire Bitcoin. In this video, I'm going to talk about this chart here, showing both the ways in which Bitcoin can be acquired and how Bitcoin, in terms of both prices, is going up indefinitely up and to the right forever. So just to give a little context on what I'm about to show you, we have to keep in mind the two different ways at which Bitcoin is priced. One is in exchange for other assets, aka the US dollar, and the other is for energy directly itself, aka electricity. See, this is the beauty of Bitcoin. This is the beauty of Bitcoin in comparison to other forms of money, other forms of currency. Bitcoin is this kind of natural money that is directly, it's like this digitization of energy. You know, at the base layer, we have raw natural energy of the world, right? You have your oil, natural gas, wind power, solar power, whatever power. You have your raw brute force energy base layer of society. It takes kinetic force to move it. Now, what humans did, because we're ingenious and very creative and via technological innovation, we created a layer above that, the electric grid. The electric grid, what the electric grid does is it takes this raw power and converts it into electricity. And above the electric layer, what we decided to do was we decided to convert that electricity into information, like computers, like the very device you're watching this video on, like your smartphone. All of these things are computers that convert electricity that has come from the natural world into information that is presented to you and information that you get to watch online. Now, how do you get to watch it online? Is because there's another layer on top of it, and that's called the internet. You might have heard of it. The internet is this communications layer that we use with our computers to communicate in real time. Now, all of these layers were necessary for Bitcoin's creation. See, when Henry Ford predicted Bitcoin in 1921, what he predicted was this kind of thing. Henry Ford predicted that there would be this kind of numerical system, a global mathematical system that would be the new world reserve currency, dethroning gold. Again, keep in mind, this is 1921. This is a decade before the Great Depression. Okay, this is the time of women's suffrage, here in the United States, right? Women were, fighting for the right to vote roughly the same time Henry Ford was predicting this, that this kind of magical made up number system, this digital system, would convert natural wealth, aka that base layer, via what today we would call a computer and the electric grid, then the computer, then internet. And today it's what we call Bitcoin. It is essentially what he predicted. And this is really important for understanding this chart I'm about to show, because this chart I'm about to show is showing both prices. See, the red line here is the price of Bitcoin in terms of political currency units. This is the price most of you watching are going to be very, very familiar with. However, the blue line is hash rate. Okay, now hash rate, what is that talking about? Hash rate is talking about the total amount of hashes per second, or the total amount of hashes that is being directed towards Bitcoin's network. And glossing over a lot here, the long story short is that as more energy, as more electricity is plugged into Bitcoin's network, that means that there's more energy total being put into Bitcoin's network and backing the coins. It's not really how it works. There's a difference between miners and nodes. We're not going to get into that right now. But for the sake of oversimplifying, in the same way that you oversimplify the solar system by giving a single visual to try to conceptualize the different movements of the planets, we're going to try to do a similar thing here today. Hash rate is not the only way at which we can quantify the amount of energy that Bitcoin is using or the security of Bitcoin's network, but it's a really good way to help us oversimplify and understand the value of Bitcoin in terms of electricity. In the same way that trying to price Bitcoin in terms of dollars is not fully sufficient, it's the same thing with hash rate. So I want to make that very clear. But both of these things are a useful oversimplification for trying to understand and communicate Bitcoin continually increasing in orders of magnitude of value. So without a further ado, let's go back to the very beginning. Okay, so again, I'm going to just give that context. The red line is Bitcoin in terms of American political currency units, and the blue line is hash rate for Bitcoin. Okay, today at the time of recording, Bitcoin's hash rate is well above the amount of energy required to operate the United States Navy. So if you're going to consider all of the aircraft carriers, all of the planes and ships, and everything involved with the U.S. Navy, all the submarines, all of these things are together combined don't produce as much energy as Bitcoin hash rate does here. So let's see if I can get this video going. My internet's having trouble. Speaking of upper layers, oh, come on. Here we go. I got it working now. It's a good thing when technology works. So, like I was just saying, here is Bitcoin roughly today, early 2024 here. Again, the red line is the chart most of you are familiar with. This is in linear scale. And the blue line also is Bitcoin's price in terms of electricity, if you want to think of it that way, or hash rate. You can see in 2021, when China banned Bitcoin in mid 2021, you can see both price in terms of US political currency units and electricity went down for Bitcoin. But see, the problem with this chart is that once you get before 2017, 2018, because this is on a linear scale, it's very difficult to conceptualize the exponential nature of Bitcoin, even in the early days. It looks like for the first 5, 10 years, Bitcoin did nothing but just stay flat and horizontal for that entire time. And that's what I want to disprove in this video here. So here we go from the beginning. This is 2011 here. We can see both fiat price and hash rate price skyrocketed up in a major bubble-like fashion. We're looking at a Bitcoin price of $2, $3, $4, $5 here. Looks like it's crashed down here, down to $4 or so. Obviously, then you have the blue line also going up as well. You can see that they're both recovering together as they're exchangeable, right? Then we have another major bubble here in 2013. Bitcoin went all the way up to a few $100s, and now we just had another bubble in fiat price. Bitcoin went up to $1,000 or roughly $1,100 or so. Blue hash rate is also going up exponentially. If we're just going to pause here for a second, this, keep in mind, this is at a Bitcoin price of $375. Okay, this is a 100x from this point to today. Okay, from this point in time in 2014 to now when I'm recording this in 2024, Bitcoin has gone up by a factor of 100x. And look at how already, if we were to place ourselves back in time 10 years to 2014, that the first few years of Bitcoin's growth looks basically fat. It looks like the network was dead. But in reality, like we just witnessed, like we just watched in this video, the nature of it is that it's continuing to grow in orders of magnitude. It's continuing to grow on an exponential curve. But because each iteration is greater than the last or greater than the sum total of all the previous iterations, it's very hard to understand that this has actually been a trend that's been going on for a very long time and not something that has just come out of the blue. So I also want to mention as we continue here, this is not my visual. This is an animated chart by Dylan LeClaire. Another young guy, another young Bitcoiner. He's on Twitter. He's the one that encoded this. I believe he did it in Python. Very impressive work. He's been learning this on his own, and I think this is some pretty solid work of putting the data in a single visual, because again, it's really hard to communicate this on a static image, but having a moving image like this really helps. So we can see here in late 2015, the blue, again, hash rate skyrocketed quickly. Fiat price followed suit, also going up. Now we're getting the 2017 bull mania. Many of you probably remember hearing about Bitcoin at this point. Bitcoin goes from roughly $1,000 all the way up to $19,000. Crashes, of course, 80% or so soon after. You can also see hash rate followed suit. It had a little bit of a lag, 6-8 months or whatever. But we had a similar thing there. As fiat price fell, the profitability of miners went down. And so, therefore miners unplugged, and therefore there's less energy in the network, less hash rate in the network. And so obviously as the bear market continues, the blue line continues to trend sideways / up a little bit. Here we get into 2019, 2020. Michael Saylor enters the picture, the first popular Wall Street guy, CEO, billionaire, coming to the network. There we just saw, if I'm going to pause this here, slow down a little bit. I remember back in 2021 when the China mining ban happened. Okay, this is that point in time. It's hard to believe, to think that I've already lived through that, and that was already years ago. But I remember people told me that Bitcoin was dead. I mean, look at this. Both the blue line and the red line in a matter of weeks fell by well over a third. This is when Bitcoin's price was $39,000. And going down back into the mid $30,000 range after just coming from the high 60,000s of dollars. Sentiment was really low. People thought that, oh, Bitcoin's dead. Everyone talked about, oh, the Bitcoin will never be banned by the government. And here we go. Chinese Communist Party in China has banned Bitcoin, and now it's already fallen by a third in a matter of weeks. At this rate, in another month, it's going to zero, right? Some people even said it's going negative. Some people at Bitcoin's bottom said that Bitcoin was going negative for reasons that I still don't fully understand, because that doesn't make any sense. But people said that Bitcoin's going down. They said it's going down indefinitely. They said it's going down to zero, or if not to zero, it's going to be at least close to zero. And then again, some people, way out on the bell curve, let's say, said it's going negative. But point is that this is important to keep in mind because this was only 2 years ago. Okay. Now we're coming up on 2.5 years, but maybe by the time you're watching this, maybe it's been 3 years, but this was not very long ago, this much negative sentiment. And again, if we put this in context of history, we see that there have been multiple cycles like this, boom bust cycles, both for Bitcoin miners, aka the blue line hash rate, as well as the red line, aka the more, money and finance and fiat minded folks. Here we just had the FTX collapse. This was another event. I tried to warn people about the FTX event. Unfortunately, many did not listen. Obviously, at the time I wasn't tweeting or making videos, so people didn't hear the message. And frankly, even if people did, they still decided not to take action. And this is what that chart looked like. And see, this is where things get interesting. People told me that, oh, FTX will never go down because it's so regulated, because, the government would never let something so regulated and so close to the SEC, the second largest crypto exchange in the world, go down. And yet it did. And in a very violent and headline worthy fashion, let's say. But after that happened, then the tune completely shifted. It went from illogical optimism that, oh, FTX will never fail, to now, oh, FTX is over, Bitcoin is dead, it's never coming back. And I tried to warn people that, hey, yeah, Bitcoin's at 15, 16, $18,000 US right now, but it still seems pretty cheap. I was telling people this. I never called for a $10,000 Bitcoin. I never called for a $12,000 Bitcoin. I said those things are possible. In fact, I was telling, people in my network that, hey, even below $10,000 Bitcoin, sure, that's possible, especially if a credit event where people have to sell because they have to gain political currency units to make their credit obligations. I mean, that's entirely possible. But when I looked at this chart, because I was looking at this chart at that time, I tried to explain to people that, hey, look at this. The blue line is continuing to go up. It just recovered from the China ban in mid 2021. Look at how amazingly quickly it recovered. In a matter of months, a third of the network came back online, which, keep in mind, at this point, we're talking about roughly the same size of the US Navy. I mean, imagine turning off a bunch of destroyers, submarines, and aircraft carriers, a third of our Navy, and then plugging it back online. Like, that's a massive operation. All the equipment required, all the physical locations and hardware required for that, the people required for that, as well as obviously the economic incentive, as well as motivation for people to come back in. Like, this is a massive shift. And the blue line, aka hash rate, aka the Bitcoin miners, and energy, the energy cost of Bitcoin, recovered really quickly. And meanwhile, fiat price crashed. In my opinion, a major reason why the fiat price crashed, or a major contributing factor, was the fallout from FTX, BlockFi, and other blowups in the late 2022 era. And so you see this massive price disparity here between the price of Bitcoin in terms of electricity, aka the price of Bitcoin to Bitcoin miners. Okay, how much energy is in the network? How much demand is there in the network for plugging your energy into it, versus what is the demand for plugging your political energy into the network, aka the US dollar. So again, we're looking here at the bottom of the bear market in 2022. And if we go out from there, we see what happened. The red line caught back up with the blue line. Okay, this was about the time I was starting to make my first videos. Bitcoin is up 154% in the last 12 months before this video is recording. And we can see that they caught it pretty well. Oops, went to black there. But if we can go back just a second, and this is where we are today in early 2024, we see that the red line is quickly catching up with the blue line. And if that continues, it's my guess that it's just going to continue upwards indefinitely. Now, having two y-axes on a single chart like this can be a bit misleading. I don't want to give the implication that just because the red line is below the blue line right now, that inherently means that it's going to go up dramatically. Likewise, it could easily go above the blue line, not necessarily come back down. What I do like about this chart, again, not my chart, Dylan LeClaire's chart, what I do like about this one is that the y-axis is roughly similar on orders of magnitude here. See, on hash rate on the left with the y-axis, you go from 0, 1, 2, 3. On the right, when it goes to price, you go from 0 to 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. So I do like that the y-axes have roughly a similar, number on a linear chart. It's important to have that, right? You don't want to skew one more than the other to artificially make them close together. So I think that's a pretty good representation, a visual representation of Bitcoin's price in terms of electricity, as well as Bitcoin's price and political energy. And ultimately, in both of these things, if you're bullish on Bitcoin absorbing monetary energy from the rest of the world, then that red line should just continue to go up indefinitely. No matter the scams that blow up, no matter the credit events that happen, eventually it should just continue to go up, because as the cost, as the value of Bitcoin in the blue line in terms of energy, electricity, and hash rate goes up, it's a feedback loop between the two, back and forth indefinitely. So I thought that was a pretty interesting visual. Again, shout out to Dylan LeClaire. Thanks for making that. I think it's a pretty good one. And until next time, hopefully you're buying Bitcoin in one of those two ways. Either you're buying it with direct electricity cost, or you're buying it with political currency. And just one final thought for you to keep in mind is that right now, at the time of recording, one Bitcoin is mined every 93 seconds. Every 93 seconds, one new Bitcoin is mined via that blue line, the hash rate. All of that energy chasing one Bitcoin every minute and a half. The final singular Bitcoin will take 35 years, from the year 2105 to 2140. Imagine how many orders of magnitude that blue line is going to rise in the next century. Okay, we just looked at the last 15 years here. Okay, that's not very long. We watched Bitcoin go from 1 cent to 10 cents to $1 to $10 to $100 to $1,000 to $10,000. Now we're on our way to 100,000 US dollars. Imagine, likewise, how many orders of magnitude that blue line is going to increase in the next 75 years out to 2100. And then from 2105 to 2140, it's going to grow more orders of magnitude as humans become more energy abundant, as we have more energy flourishing, as we find new energy sources, as we actually plug in nuclear, and we phase out fossil fuels slowly over the next century, and we upgrade into better, more efficient, higher amounts of energy, both globally and per capita. That's a large amount of energy. And the last Bitcoin is going to take 35 years of that blue line going up to acquire it. So why should people get to one Bitcoin? It's because you can own 35 years of that blue line in the early 22nd century. You may not live to see that time, maybe not even your kids. Hopefully you do, and hopefully your kids do, but one way or the other, getting from here to there, Bitcoin's going to go up orders of magnitude, both in terms of the amount of political currency units it's going to take to acquire one Bitcoin, as well as the amount of energy, the amount of natural wealth that it takes to acquire Bitcoin. Went back full circle to Henry Ford's prediction. So thank you to the Bitcoin pioneers. Thank you for the Bitcoin pioneers in 2010 and now the 2020s. And thank you to Henry Ford and the many others that predicted this thing, because it's a beautiful visual. It's a beautiful idea. And ultimately, it gives people like you and me the opportunity to buy a whole Bitcoin and keep it secure for future generations to come. So hope you enjoyed this video, a little different perspective, but hopefully it's useful. Thanks.